Hello and welcome to the first of our 2023 summer webinar and open house series, How to Maximize Your Iron, Calcium, and Zinc on a Plant-Based Diet. For those of you who don't know us yet, I'm Dr. Rick Dina, and you'll be hearing from Dr. Karen Dina in a few minutes. We're both chiropractic physicians who have been on the whole food plant-based path for 35 or so years each, essentially all of our adult lives, and are board certified and licensed in the state of California. We have hosted raw food and plant-based summits for the past 8 years in a row, where we interviewed other successful, healthy, long-term raw vegan educators and plant-based doctors to share with you how you can be successful on this path over the long term as well. We're also the authors of the Raw Food Nutrition Handbook. And as you can see from the banners, we've had some different themes and titles for our summits over the years, but throughout them all, and for decades before that as well, our approach to diet and nutrition can be summed up by whole food, all plant, based on fruits and vegetables, and you can quote us on that. No matter where you are on this path, if heading in this direction sounds reasonable and desirable, or better yet, exciting to you, that is fantastic. From just getting started by adding more fruits and vegetables into your diet, to having been there yourself for many years and wanting further education and refinement. We are the developers and instructors of the year-long Mastering Raw Food Nutrition online and interactive plant-based curriculum that we're going into our 8th year teaching, and we're also the developers and instructors of the precursor to that course, the Science of Raw Food Nutrition series of classes that we taught for just about 10 years live in person. For those of you interested, we'll share more about our Mastering Raw Food Nutrition plant-based curriculum later on in this webinar. So over the years, through our teachings, we have become known for our thoroughness and our scientific accuracy. We have had, for example, many nurses, medical doctors, holistic nutritionists, dietitians, people with PhDs, and people who just really like accurate science join us for our course, and they're always very happy with that. At the same time, we are also known for our ability to make complex subjects easy to understand and to see how each detailed piece fits into the cohesive whole, so you're not just jumbled around with all this stuff going on that different people have different opinions about and confused. So many people tell us that we really are able to make things make sense. Now, we also have an encouraging, affirming approach that takes unnecessary hurdles out of people's way and reduces stress. So you won't hear us say there's only one way to do things, or that you have to eat or think in a certain way to be in the club, or do a certain thing in order to be a superhero, or any other stuff like that. We won't tell you you're wrong if you aren't perfect. Our approach is that we like to meet everyone where they are and then educate, guide, and encourage them toward what the next steps are and to make changes that are sustainable over a lifetime. We are authentic, straightforward, and no nonsense. We tell it like it is, and we let the information and results speak for themselves. We don't oversimplify things, and we don't overcomplicate things. We report accurately in a way that people can understand and connect to. Our thinking there is that when you have the best information, you can make the best decisions about how to eat and live and be as healthy as possible and have confidence that you're making the best choices, and that is part of health as well. It's all about learning, growing, and implementing to increase the quality of our lives. Before we continue, we want to make sure that we let you know that the information and opinions expressed by us in this webinar are not intended to be used as medical advice and should not be used to diagnose or treat any medical condition or as a substitute for individual health care. This webinar is presented with the understanding that we are not liable for misconception, misuse, or adverse effects resulting from its use. Any type of dietary change, nutritional therapy, or fasting should always be undertaken with the supervision of a qualified health care practitioner. And please note that watching this webinar does not establish a doctor-patient relationship between us and you. All of our webinars follow the same basic outline. We've got the introduction that we're just about at the end of now, and in the next section you will hear Dr. Karen and myself speak about our backgrounds. We've honed them down over the years, so what you'll hear here is quite succinct. In past years, we have expanded upon our backgrounds a bit more, and actually in our 2023 Raw Food and Plant-Based Summit, we actually interviewed ourselves and answered many of the same questions that we asked our summit speakers, including what motivated you to get started and what were some of our first steps. So in that, for those of you who watched or purchased the summit, you can see a lot more about our backgrounds there. So then after you know who you're hearing from, we give webinar-specific sample educational content. For a lot of you, that's just good, solid information to connect with to support you on a whole food, plant-based diet based on fruits and vegetables. And for some of you who are thinking about joining us with Mastering Raw Food Nutrition, it gives you an idea of how we teach and therefore what to expect in the educational videos in that course. For the last 15 or 20 minutes of each webinar, we cover the details of Mastering Raw Food Nutrition, what we cover in there, how it's delivered, what the benefits are, who it's appropriate for, etc. And if you're here with us live, there is a live question and answer session, but if you are watching the recording, we finish up at the end of section 5. Now that the introduction's complete, we'll move on to a few minutes of Dr. Karen's background.
I found raw food at a time when I was experiencing notable fatigue for which there was apparently no answer. I was in college at the time and I was sleeping 10, 12, and sometimes even more hours per night, and still waking up non-refreshed. I saw 3 medical professionals, and after multiple lab tests and evaluations, I had a diagnosis: fatigue of unknown origin. They had a whole list of everything that I didn't have, but could not pinpoint the source of my fatigue. I asked every single one of them if my fatigue may have had anything to do with my college diet and lifestyle. They all emphatically said no. Things really started to change, however, when a friend gave me a copy of a book that discussed vegan diets and the connection between diet and health. I also learned about the connections between diet and the environment and the way animals are treated. And with all these compelling arguments, I was open to giving this approach a try, and I became vegan. In addition to feeling good about eating compassionately and leaving a lighter footprint on the earth, I was so excited to find that my fatigue actually started to improve, despite what the so-called experts, in this case the medical professionals, said would happen. This personal experience opened the door to my thinking that diet really could make a difference in health and left me open to exploring other opportunities. When I learned about and implemented a raw food diet, my energy soared far beyond the impressive improvements that I experienced by eating vegan. Long story short, my fatigue vanished, along with a variety of other symptoms that I'd had for years, and I had more energy than I knew what to do with. I could not remember a time when I felt better. I started to look healthier and I slept better. I enjoyed exercising and my digestion improved. I was so inspired by the health results I was experiencing that I felt compelled to learn more about the inner workings of the human body, nutrition, and the diet-health connection. I really wanted to immerse myself in learning as much as I could, so I earned a second undergraduate degree in biology and then received doctorate-level education in naturopathic medicine and chiropractic, which helped me to put everything that I observed into perspective, and on a much deeper level. Over the years, I've refined and revised my approach to raw food and tailored it to my individual needs. And we can show you how to do this too. Next, Dr. Rick will share with you a bit about his background and experience with raw food and plant-based nutrition. So take it away, Dr. Rick.
Here are a couple of photos of me before and after from my late teens. They're about a year and a few months apart. In the process of going from the first photo to the second one, as you can imagine, I felt an awful lot better. That very much inspired me to keep learning as much as I could. Now, in the past year's webinars, I have given some more details about my background. I've included things like athletic endeavors, race times, etc. So if you go back to 2018, 19, 20 and watch some of those webinars, you can see more details. Also, for those of you who saw our 2023 Raw Food and Plant-Based Mastery Summit, Dr. Karen and I each did a self-interview where we shared quite a bit more about our background. So if you saw that, or if you have purchased the summit and have lifetime access, you can see more details. For this webinar, though, we're just going to cover the basics and keep things succinct to keep things moving. A few years after each of those photos that you saw, I graduated from the University of Connecticut with a degree in business administration. After graduating, I got a job as a chiropractic assistant and saw some really excellent things happen with patient recovery during that time. After a year of that, I had the opportunity to work at a raw vegan health institute in West Palm Beach, Florida. Some of you have been around the movement for a while. Remember the Juice Man, a guy named Jay Kordich who would come on infomercials and talk about juices. So for a while back in the early 90s, I was part of the support team that would travel around the country and put on seminars and sell juicers and talk to people about the benefits of fresh fruits and vegetables and their juices. So that was pretty fun. At that point, it was extremely clear to me that I was really into health and wanted to make a lifetime career out of that. So I went back to school to earn a doctorate degree in chiropractic. And I've got to say, so many things that I knew about already about health got so much more clear, and I understood in so much more depth and understood how it all fit together so much more by learning all of the sciences, earning my doctorate degree to a level that just would not have been possible without some type of advanced degree like that. That also afforded me the opportunity to go to True North Health, where I did a 6-month internship and then ended up staying for 4 years. Those of you who don't know, True North Health is a medically supervised water-only fasting center. I got to witness or be involved in the supervision of the care of 600 to 800 fasting patients during that time, and I saw some absolutely remarkable things. A lot I could say about that, but it was truly remarkable, and got to just a wealth of clinical experience from that. I was actually stolen away from True North by my long-distance girlfriend at the time, whose name was Dr. Karen. She was becoming Dr. Karen. She actually was going to Bastyr University, as you heard her say, in the naturopathic medical program. So I moved up there with her, and I actually developed a curriculum that I taught to the naturopathic medical students. As I mentioned at the beginning, we developed the Science of Raw Food Nutrition curriculum over the course of several years. I mean, it was thousands of hours worth of effort to put that course together, and it laid the foundation. We taught that in person for about 10 years, and that laid the foundation for the new and improved Mastering Raw Food Nutrition curriculum that we are going into our 8th year of teaching now. For several of these years, in addition to a lot of clinical experience from True North, I worked with patients who were vegans and raw vegans, or those who would like to be, guiding them nutritionally, looking at their lab work, etc. And I learned an awful lot there as well. Things you can't learn from reading in books and those types of things. One of the nice things I like about that is a lot of my clinical experience working with patients was incorporated, and still is incorporated, into our Mastering Raw Food Nutrition curriculum, and a lot of the things we teach our students very much come in handy with our patients also. So the two of those very much work synergistically. Now that we've covered the introduction and you know a little bit more about who you'll be hearing from, let's move on to the educational topic for this webinar.
Our topics for this webinar are iron, calcium, and zinc. So to get started, iron and calcium are often thought to be largely found in certain leafy greens, while zinc is often touted as being largely found in nuts and seeds. Today, we'll see if that's completely true. So first off, what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about iron and calcium, and then after that, we'll take a closer look at zinc. So our first nutrient is iron. Now, iron is an element, and for nutritional purposes, we'll call it a mineral. It's involved in a number of activities in the body, including the formation of red blood cells. Now, in red blood cells, iron is involved in carrying oxygen from our lungs to our tissues and in carrying carbon dioxide from our tissues back to our lungs, where it can be exhaled as a waste product. Now, essentially, iron plays an important role in the oxygenation of our tissues. And sometimes when people are low in iron and they have an iron deficiency, then their body's ability to oxygenate its tissues is compromised. And so sometimes these people experience fatigue. Now, when I was experiencing fatigue back in college, an iron test was one of the lab tests that I was given. Now, as it turned out, I wasn't iron deficient then. So my doctors looked on to other possibilities. Now, other functions iron is involved with in our body include energy production and immune system function, among others. Now, there's two main dietary forms of iron. There's the heme form and the non-heme form. The heme form of iron is found in animal foods and supplements. And when I say animal foods, I'm mostly referring to red meat. Many different supplements that I've seen contain heme iron, and how I can tell is by looking at the supplement bottle or container in the ingredients list, and if I see the words ferrous sulfate, then that means that the supplement contains the heme form of iron. Now, the non-heme form of iron is a type of iron that's found in plant foods. Now, I don't know if you've heard this, but many times I've heard people say that the iron found in animal foods is more easily absorbed than the type of iron that's found in plant foods. And my answer to this idea is this. It's a little bit more specific than that. And as it turns out, the form of iron in plant foods is more selectively absorbed than the iron that's found in animal foods. And what that means is that with the non-heme form of iron, the iron status of the person affects absorption. So this form of iron is absorbed more readily when it's needed by the body and less readily when it's not needed, which is actually really good because iron is a really important mineral, but we don't want too much of it. Now, the heme form of iron is less selectively absorbed, which means that the body absorbs this form of iron whether or not it needs it. Having enough iron is important, but too much can be potentially problematic because iron is associated with the formation of free radicals, and free radicals can cause damage to our tissues and in addition to other problems. Now let's take a look at calcium. Calcium is the most abundant mineral in the human body, with over 99% found in our bones and teeth, and the other 1% is found in our body tissues and blood. Now, even though only 1% is found in our tissues and blood, this 1% plays a very important role in muscle contraction and in acid-alkaline balance. For example, every time you move a muscle, calcium is involved. And in the bloodstream and elsewhere, calcium is involved in helping to maintain acid-alkaline balance. Calcium is also a major structural mineral, making up a significant percentage of the mineral content in our bones. Now, there are some substances that we find in some foods that can bind to iron, calcium, and zinc, making them less usable by the human body. Oxalic acid, also known as oxalate, is one of those substances. Oxalate binds to iron, calcium, and zinc, making them less bioavailable or less usable to our body. Oxalate is found in a number of foods, but certain foods are very high in oxalate, making them not very good sources of iron, calcium, and zinc. Examples would include what we have up here on the screen: spinach, Swiss chard, beet greens, parsley, and purslane, for example. Now, it's important to note that these are not bad foods, they're just not good sources of iron, calcium, and zinc, especially when they're raw. Now, many of these foods actually have a lot of these important minerals, but most of the iron, calcium, and zinc are bound to oxalate and therefore not usable by our body. Now, it's important to note that oxalate will not steal iron or calcium or zinc or any other minerals from your body, and that's really good to know. Now, here's a table showing the oxalate content of some foods that we just mentioned. And as you can see, parsley, chives, purslane, spinach, and beet greens are much higher in oxalic acid than the foods that are further down on this table. It's difficult to avoid oxalic acid altogether, but if we focus our diet on lower oxalate foods, less of our dietary iron, calcium, or zinc will be bound to oxalate and will therefore be more available for use by our body for important processes such as the formation of red blood cells and assisting with carrying oxygen from our lungs to our tissues. I know we've talked about oxalate as being problematic. There actually is a good side to it, though, and that has to do with microbiome diversity. Now, up here on the screen, I have Oxalobacter formigenes. It's an anaerobic bacterium that commonly inhabits the human gut in our microbiome, and it uses oxalate as its major energy source. Now, Oxalobacter formigenes and other probiotics need food to survive, and since Oxalobacter formigenes' favorite food is oxalate, it makes sense that this organism would survive well in the microbiome of people who consume some oxalate. Now, in this way, having some oxalate in one's diet can help to promote microbiome diversity. Now, there are other probiotics that are being studied for their ability to consume oxalate, including certain lactobacillus species and certain bifidobacterium species. So kind of the bottom line here is having some oxalate in our diet can help to promote microbiome diversity. Now, there's a lot of confusion about iron and calcium and what are actual good sources on a raw or plant-based diet. So now I would like to kind of shift gears a little bit and talk about the calcium and iron content of certain foods. And then in a few minutes, we'll talk about zinc. Now, the reason why I want to talk about calcium and iron here is because calcium and iron tend to be found in similar foods. So there seems to be a lot of confusion about iron and calcium and what actual good sources are on a raw or plant-based diet. Now, leafy greens generally have a reputation as being good sources of iron and calcium, and the two plant families that contain the greens that are richest in calcium and iron are the cabbage family, also known as the cruciferous vegetables. You've probably heard of that term. And the botanical name for that family is the Brassicaceae. It used to be called the cruciferae, not surprisingly. And also the sunflower family. Now, on this table that we have up here on the slide, we have several members of the cabbage family. And as you can see, these leafy greens in the quantities that are shown are pretty notable sources of calcium and iron. So if we look up here on the slide, we see that for 3 cups of chopped kale, we have 271 milligrams of calcium and 3.42 milligrams of iron. Now, what do those numbers actually mean? Let's take a look at the adult daily values. For iron, we've got 8 milligrams for men and postmenopausal women. And then for premenopausal women, we have 18 milligrams. And then the adult daily values for calcium, we have 1,000 milligrams for women up to the age of 50 and men up to the age of 70. And then for women over 50, we have 1,200 milligrams. And that's also the same value for men over 70. So as you can see, 3 cups of chopped kale, the iron content, calcium content is really, really good. Now, I understand that not everybody is necessarily going to want to consume 3 cups of chopped kale, so you can actually adjust these numbers based on the amount that you are consuming. And then we've got 3 cups of bok choy, 220 milligrams of calcium, that's really good, and 1.68 milligrams of iron. And then further down on the chart, we have Napa cabbage, arugula, watercress, and broccoli. And you can see the amounts of calcium for the amounts of these foods shown is actually pretty good. As far as the iron content goes, it looks like the arugula and broccoli in the amount shown is pretty good as well. And on this slide, we have the sunflower family. So to take a look, we have 2 cups of dandelion greens chopped, loosely packed. The amount of iron is 341 milligrams, and then calcium, 206. That's actually really good. And then for romaine lettuce, we have 1 head. And just so you know, it's not unusual for some raw foodists to consume this amount of lettuce in a salad. So what we have for iron for that is 6.1 milligrams, which is really good. Calcium content, 207. Further down on the table, we have frisee greens, also known as curly endive or curly endive. For 3 cups of that, we have 1.2 milligrams of iron and 78 milligrams of calcium. That's pretty good. It's not as strong as the ones that we mentioned previously. And then we have 4 cups of chopped romaine lettuce. I wanted to include this because not everybody's going to consume an entire head of romaine lettuce. So just to show you here, from 4 cups of chopped romaine lettuce, we have 1.82 milligrams of iron and 62 milligrams of calcium. That's still pretty good for a smaller amount of lettuce. And then next, I want to talk a little bit about nuts and seeds, because I know that nuts and seeds are oftentimes touted as being great sources of zinc, but what about iron and calcium? So we have 1 tablespoon of chia seeds. The iron content of that is 1.6 milligrams. That's very good. 63 milligrams of calcium. That's good also. And then 1 tablespoon of unhulled sesame seeds, 1.3 milligrams of iron and 88 milligrams of calcium. And then we have pumpkin seeds and hemp seeds. Those are pretty strong with iron, but not as strong with calcium. And then for almonds, a 1/4 cup, we've got 1.3 milligrams of iron and 112 milligrams of calcium. And before we move on, I wanted to mention that phytate, kind of similar to oxalate, is another substance that we find in certain foods that can affect the absorption of certain minerals like iron and calcium. And we'll talk about phytate in just a few minutes because phytate can be found in nuts and seeds like we mentioned here. Fortunately, there is a way that we can decrease the amount of phytate found in these foods so that we can make the iron, calcium, and zinc more available for use by our body. But first, I want to address an important consideration. Now, we often hear that fruit is a good source of antioxidants and calories in the form of simple carbohydrates and not much else. It's very rare that I actually hear somebody talking about fruit as being a source of minerals. So let's take a look and see for ourselves. Up here on the screen, I have a table that shows a variety of different fruits and the iron and calcium content. So first of all, we have mulberries, 1 cup fresh. Now I wanted to mention here that I have shown a variety of different types of fruit. And I understand that certain fruits are not going to be available at certain times of the year in certain parts of the world or certain parts of the United States. I just have these up here to show you so that you can make choices based on what's available in your area. I'm not saying that you need to consume these things or you should go out of your way to try to find them. It's just good to know what really good sources of iron and calcium are so you can find what works best for you and what's available in your area. So mulberries, 1 cup fresh, we have 2.59 milligrams of iron. That's really, really good. Calcium content, 55 milligrams. Now, I know, like I said, not everybody's going to have access to mulberries, but when I was a kid growing up in the Northeast, there was a mulberry tree at the top of my street, and in mid-July, I would go up there and get cups and cups worth. I mean, I would eat handfuls of these things. They were so amazing. So at certain times of the year, you can certainly find these different types of fruits in different places. If you like dates, they can be a significant source of iron and to some degree calcium. Meme, sapote, and durian, I understand that those can be difficult to find in certain areas, but in other areas they can be quite plentiful. Now, I want to talk about figs here, because figs can be found, especially in the summertime, in certain areas of the U.S. 5 fresh figs, 0.9 milligrams of iron, and 88 milligrams of calcium. That is really amazing. We actually have a brown turkey fig tree in our front yard, and in July and September, we can get handfuls of figs. It's amazing. So the amount of calcium and iron that we can get from those figs, significant. Same with blackberries. Blackberries can be found in the area where we live too. So 1 cup fresh blackberries, almost 0.9 milligrams of iron and 42 milligrams of calcium. That's not bad. Raspberries, 1 cup fresh, 0.85 milligrams of iron, 31 milligrams of calcium. Persimmons are not a super great source of calcium, as you can see, but you can get a decent amount of iron from them, especially if you eat them in quantity. Strawberries, apricots, bananas, if you eat them in quantity, you can get a decent amount of these minerals. And then grapes are oftentimes touted as being a good source of iron because raisins, dried grapes, are considered to be a decent source of iron too. Now, I also wanted to mention here kiwi fruit and Valencia oranges because they can be a decent source of calcium, specifically if they're eaten in quantity. Because what we have here is 2 peeled kiwi fruit at 47 milligrams of calcium, and then 2 medium Valencia oranges, almost 100 milligrams of calcium. That is really, really good. So as we can see here, fruit can be a decent source of these minerals, or at least a contributory source of these minerals. Now, what if you eat them in quantity? Up here on the screen, we have the iron content of common fruits, and in the amounts that some raw foodists actually eat, because some people who eat a high fruit raw food diet can eat significant amounts of fruit. So as we can see here, the berries like mulberries, blackberries, raspberries, they can provide a significant amount of iron when eaten in the quantities that I've mentioned here. 3 cups for each. Mulberries especially, 7.77 milligrams of iron. Amazing. And then further down on the list, we have strawberries, apricots, and bananas. And as you can see, those eaten in quantity can have a decent amount of iron as well. And then as far as calcium goes, figs, Valencia oranges, mulberries, even papaya, and to some degree strawberries and apricots can be a decent amount of iron as well. If you're going to, once again, eat them in quantity. 20 fresh figs, 352 milligrams of calcium. 6 Valencia oranges, almost 300 milligrams of calcium. Wow, that's pretty good. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that you should eat these foods in the quantities that I'm mentioning. I'm just providing this information for those of you who eat fruit in quantity so you can see where you are nutrient-wise. Now I'd like to take a closer look at zinc, since zinc has some differences from iron and calcium in where it tends to be found. Now, why is zinc important? Now, this group of researchers up here has referred to zinc as the gatekeeper of immune function. And I like to think of zinc as the great communicator of immune function because of its involvement in the communication within and in between immune system cells and other cells of our body. Now, a little bit earlier, we talked a little bit about oxalate, and everything that we talked about with oxalate in regard to calcium and iron is the same for zinc. So we want to minimize the consumption of high oxalate foods like spinach, Swiss chard, beet greens, parsley, and purslane. And everything that I said earlier applies to zinc just as it does to iron and calcium. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about phytate, since zinc can be found in nuts and seeds which tend to contain phytate. Now phytate binds to iron, calcium, and zinc in the food that contains them, making these minerals less available for use by the human body. Now here's a slide showing the phytate content of certain foods. And as you can see, certain nuts and seeds and grains are the highest in phytate when compared to the fruits and vegetables that are further down on the table. As you can see, things like wild rice, Brazil nuts, sesame seeds, almonds, walnuts, and cashews, they're much higher in phytate than the foods that we see further down on the table. Now, just because these foods are higher in phytate does not mean that they're bad foods. It just means that they're not going to be our best sources of zinc, iron, and calcium. However, this is where soaking comes in. Now, you've likely heard that soaking nuts and seeds can help to release enzyme inhibitors, which actually is true. Additionally, research has shown that soaking also inactivates phytate. In other words, when you soak your nuts and seeds, you can decrease the phytate content of those foods, allowing the iron, calcium, and zinc to be more available for use by the body. Now, in this case, soaking has a dual purpose: breaking down of enzyme inhibitors for improved digestion and inactivation of phytate for increased zinc, iron, and calcium availability. And here's how it works. Soaking activates the enzyme phytase found in nuts and seeds and grains, which breaks down the phytate. Now, sprouting also will help to activate phytase. Soaking may also decrease phytate through the leaching of phytate into the soak water. So, in other words, not only does soaking inactivate phytate, it can also lead to the movement of phytate from the food and into the soak water. How much of a difference can soaking and sprouting make in phytate content? Now, this table shows the results of a study that compared the difference in iron availability between unsoaked, soaked, and sprouted sorghum grain. Now, I know that grains are controversial, so I'm not suggesting that one actually eat sorghum grain or any other type of grain for that matter. I'm just using this example to illustrate the difference in iron availability. Now, as you can see, soaking and sprouting certainly appeared to make a significant difference, and other available research tends to mirror these findings. So as you can see, the raw unsoaked sorghum here, the iron availability in it is lower than what we see with the soaked and the germinated. So next we'll take a look at plant sources of zinc. And I mentioned that nuts and seeds have a decent amount of zinc in them, which we'll talk about in just a couple minutes. But first, I'd like to talk about some of these other foods here too. Now, I mentioned a little bit earlier that zinc tends to be found in slightly different foods than where you find iron and calcium, and this table up here kind of reflects that. But just so you know, I also included the iron and calcium content of these foods just for comparison purposes, so you could see for yourself. Now, first up here on the list, we have green peas, 1 cup. And it's not unusual for some people on plant-based diets to include green peas in their salad. A cup might be too much for some people, but for somebody like me, I actually would consume a cup in my salad. So what we have for that zinc-wise is 1.8 milligrams. That's really, really good. And if we compare that to the adult daily values for zinc, which are 8 milligrams for women and 11 milligrams for men, that's actually pretty good. And a little bit earlier, I talked about 1 head of romaine lettuce. What we have here for zinc is 1.44 milligrams. That's very good. And then for sprouted peas, some people like to eat pea sprouts. 1 cup of sprouted peas, we've got 1.3 milligrams of zinc. And then sprouted lentils, 1 cup of sprouted lentils, 1.2 milligrams of zinc. That's pretty good. And I mentioned endive a little bit earlier, endive, 3 cups chopped, 1.2 milligrams of zinc, and then the amounts of zinc tend to go down further down on the chart. But as you can see, these vegetables and sprouts and leafy greens can have a decent amount of zinc in them, especially if they are eaten in quantity. Now, what about nuts and seeds? I've said a couple of times that nuts and seeds tend to be thought of as being rich in zinc, but let's take a look for ourselves. Hemp seeds are often talked about as being rich in zinc. Is that true? 2 tablespoons, 1.4 milligrams of zinc. Yeah, that's pretty good. And pumpkin seeds are often touted as being a good source of zinc. Are they? 2 tablespoons of pumpkin seeds contain 1.4 milligrams of zinc. Very good. And then the same thing with sesame seeds here. We've got 2 tablespoons of sesame seeds at also 1.4 milligrams of zinc. So hemp seeds, pumpkin seeds, sesame seeds all have a decent amount of zinc in them. Cashews, chia seeds, and almonds have a little bit less, as we can see here. But then look at down here. Look at wild rice. And I know that some people are skeptical or concerned about the consumption of grains, but I wanted to include wild rice here because I was just so astounded when I saw the amount of zinc in wild rice. 1/2 cup uncooked and unsoaked, 4.8 milligrams of zinc. That's really, really impressive. Very impressive. So years ago, when I used to teach a raw food course at a raw culinary school, the students would talk about blooming wild rice. And how do you bloom wild rice? They would talk about taking wild rice and soaking it, and then putting the soaking wild rice into a dehydrator for 12 to 24 hours, depending on the ambient temperature and the temperature within the dehydrator. If you want to know more about how to do this, I would suggest that you take a look online to see if there are recipes or instructions on how to do that. I'm not going to go into the details of that here now, but what happens to the wild rice when you bloom it is that it opens up. It opens up and it makes it much easier to eat. Some people also like to cook it, and you can certainly do that if that's something that you'd like to do. But I've actually bloomed wild rice several times, and it tastes really good. It's delicious, actually. One thing to be aware of, though, is that sometimes the little grains of wild rice might not completely bloom, and they might be kind of hard. So it's always good to check through the wild rice before you eat it to make sure that there aren't any hard pieces in there that might be hard to eat. Next, I'd like to spend a couple of minutes talking about the zinc content of a variety of different fruits. And the reason why is because earlier we talked about the iron and calcium content of some of these fruits as well. And as you can see up here on the screen, these fruits actually can have a decent amount of zinc in them in the case of certain ones that we can see up here, like watermelon eaten in quantity, cantaloupe eaten in quantity, and then avocado, peaches, blackberries, pomegranate, and then even raspberries and some of the other ones. As you can see, fruit is not completely devoid of zinc. There's actually, in some cases, a decent amount. Something to think about. And I also included the amount of iron and calcium of these fruits up here, so you can take a look. Some of them can be actually pretty good. So as it turns out, fruit in some cases can be a significant source of important minerals, and in other cases can make contributory amounts of these important minerals to one's diet. Now, it's very interesting to see the nutrient content of individual foods, but how much iron and calcium and zinc do we find in foods when they're eaten together? So up here on the slide, we have an example of sort of a medium-sized salad that has 4 cups of romaine lettuce, 3 cups of dandelion greens, and then 1 cup each of cucumber, carrots, and tomatoes. And then for the dressing, we have some lemon juice with 1 tablespoon of tahini. So not a huge salad, but check this out. This is very interesting. For a little bit over 200 calories, we have 8.4 milligrams of iron. That's very good. And 506 milligrams of calcium. And then 2.6 milligrams of zinc. And how do these numbers compare to the adult daily values? Let's revisit those. The adult daily values for iron, 8 milligrams for men and postmenopausal women, and then 18 milligrams for premenopausal women. Adult daily values for calcium, 1,000 milligrams for women up to the age of 50, and men up to the age of 70, and then 1,200 milligrams for women over the age of 50, 51 and above, and men over the age of 70, so 71 and above. And then the adult daily values for zinc, 8 milligrams for women and 11 milligrams for men. So just to go back for comparison, 8.4 milligrams of iron from this salad alone for 200 calories. That's excellent. And then 506 milligrams of calcium. That's also excellent. And then 2.6 milligrams of zinc. Very, very good. So here's a picture of what the salad looks like. As you can see, it's kind of a medium-sized mixing bowl. It's about 10 inches in diameter. And then here's also a picture of the salad with some of that dressing that I mentioned on it. And another thing I'd like to mention, which I actually mentioned earlier, but I wanted to mention it again. If you're somebody who has challenges with eating salads of this size, you could always blend to make it into a soup. That's one thing that works very well for many people. Now next, we have a larger salad. And for people who eat a raw food diet, this is not unusual. And I want to show this so that you can see what the salad looks like from an iron, calcium, and zinc perspective. So with this salad, it's kind of similar to the other one. The main difference is that we have 8 cups of chopped romaine lettuce instead of 4. Everything else is the same. The 3 cups of dandelion greens, the 1 cup of cucumber, carrots, and tomato. And then the dressing is different. We still have some lemon juice, but we've added some other foods to increase the nutrient content of the dressing. And also to increase the flavor of the dressing and to allow for more coverage of the added amount of vegetables, specifically the lettuce in this salad. So we have some red bell pepper, some almonds, some zucchini and chia seeds added to the sesame. In this case, we actually have sesame seeds instead of tahini that we did in the previous salad. So where are we when it comes to iron, calcium, and zinc? As you can see here, 14.1 milligrams of iron. Wow, that is fantastic. 742 milligrams of calcium, also great. And 5 milligrams of zinc, amazing. Fantastic. And this is for 679 calories. And if you compare that to what somebody eats in a day when it comes to calorie-wise, I usually eat about 2,000 calories per day. So this salad is something that I would eat, and it's not unusual to get this amount of these important nutrients in a salad of this size. And here's what the salad looks like. It's about 12 inches in diameter, and as you can see, it's a pretty good sized salad. So the information that I've covered here today represents the type of information that we cover in our Mastering Raw Food Nutrition 12-month online course, and is really just the tip of the iceberg of the fascinating and essential information that we cover so that you can succeed over the long term with raw food and plant-based eating. Next, Dr. Rick will share with you more about Mastering Raw Food Nutrition, so take it away, Dr. Rick.
In this webinar, we covered a very small fraction of what we have to offer in terms of reliable, accurate, and empowering information about raw food and plant-based diets. For those of you wishing to continue your education with us, you may want to consider our Mastering Raw Food Nutrition 12-month online and interactive course. Our next group program begins on August 30th, 2023, and each year we begin in late August or early September depending on how the calendar happens to work out for that year. I'll first go over some of the topics we cover and then explain how the course is delivered so you know exactly what to expect. So in years past, I've had all these different thumbnails come out of all the different topics, and it's actually taken me 6 or 8 minutes to list out what topics we cover in this course and a little explanation. This year, in the interest of time, I'm going to put these all out in bullet points on 4 different slides, and any of you who would like to see exactly what's covered, I would encourage you to just hit pause. If you're here with us live, you'll be getting an email to the replay of the webinar where you can hit pause, or if you're watching the recording, you can hit pause as well. The bottom line is we cover a huge array of topics, very in depth and very clearly, and we see how everything fits together. Students leave with an extreme confidence and understanding of how all of this fits and how to implement it into their lives. So before going on to how things are delivered, want to look at just what a few of our students in last year's class had to say when we sent out the survey near the end of the academic year. So Delyn from Alaska says, as a lifelong learner on a continuing need to educate myself, I came upon the Mastering Raw Food Nutrition program. I hadn't really thought about moving onto a raw food diet, but I was curious and needed to learn more about how this would fit my quest for a healthy body and mind. I was open to the journey. Now a year later, I am here. I am in. I'm so much more confident in my health decisions now that I've been armed with facts, studies, science, and truth about food. I'm much more educated nutritionally and can make wise food choices without confusion now. It's very liberating. The progress I have made in understanding the complex nature, chemistry, physiology, interactions, and functions of the raw food diet, along with fasting, this past year have taken me further than I could have expected. The material presented has altered my comprehension, thereby altering my lifestyle and life choices. The Mastering Raw Food Nutrition class taught by Drs. Rick and Karen is backed by scientific facts and has been a pleasure to study. The degrees of knowledge on all aspects of nutrition has been impressive and seems to me has left no stone unturned, no path unexplored, no aspect unaddressed. In short, comprehensive. So again, if you go back and look at all those topics, we cover, just about everything really important. Delyn says, I'm so glad I dove into this class and will forever be grateful to be taught a path to follow with all confidence. An anonymous student said, this was the best course I have ever taken, and I've taken a lot of great courses in my life. It was like getting a master's degree in nutrition. The presentations were so good that I was learning complicated information with relative ease. Being able to ask questions and hear other students' excellent questions contributed greatly to my knowledge. Our guess is that this student did not want to offend the other teachers from the other great courses she has taken in her life. We actually saw her recently giving a testimonial for another course that she took, and she explained how great Mastering Raw Food Nutrition was, but then that was live, but then we noticed the next day that had been edited out. So in any case, when someone's taken a lot of courses and they like ours that much, it's always a true honor for us. Oh, and another thing I didn't say about Delyn. Delyn and her husband are lifelong educators. So the educators who take our course know what it takes to put a course like ours together, and they tend to appreciate it more than people who don't understand what it takes to put something like this together. It's a huge undertaking, but we see the results and we're really happy about that. Last one before talking about how the class works, Roxy from Maryland says, as someone comparatively new to the raw food lifestyle, I felt Mastering Raw Food Nutrition would be the perfect deep dive into the well-researched, documented science supporting the benefits of eating raw or high raw, as well as various myths and information. I wanted to learn not only to help myself, but also to knowledgeably share with and respond to the inquisitiveness of those in my personal life and on social media. Already highly respected in the vegan community and beyond, Drs. Rick and Karen present a finely tuned course that truly leaves no stone unturned. So there that is again. Their knowledge and expertise is evident throughout, and both Dr. Rick and Dr. Karen are skilled, patient, professional, gifted teachers. The variety of students participating from across the globe, from established health professionals and published authors to people similar to me, breaded the learning and sharing experience. No matter where you are on your health journey, this course, in my opinion, is a must. So again, we're always deeply honored to get those types of testimonials from our students when we send our survey out at the end of the year. And every single time we teach this course, there are those types of comments, and our students tell us on the weekly conferences and in emails and other things how grateful they are for the course. So how is it that we actually deliver this level of confidence and appreciation? So there are 2 hours worth of professional quality videos, very similar to what you saw here in this webinar, released per week. We make it convenient. You watch those videos on your own schedule, and they remain there for the rest of the course in case you'd ever like to review them, because the later material in the course does build upon the foundation we lay at the beginning. Now, each couple of hours worth of video content that you see takes us, oh my God, probably 10 to 50 hours worth of background time to do the research, to put it together, to think through how is this going to make sense to people. So we make extremely efficient use of your time. Instead of you going out there spending thousands of hours and years or potentially decades trying to figure this all out yourself and sorting through all the confusion out there on social media, we have done that work for you over many years and condensed things down into what's most important, and we make it understandable. So 2 hours worth of quality videos per week. We also offer the audio-only version of the videos. So for those of you who are maybe your phone's in an area where the reception's not good, or you don't want to use an excessive amount of mobile data, those audio files are a lot smaller than the video files. So those are there to take advantage of if you wish. To complement the videos, we offer 4 comprehensive notebooks that we physically mail to you throughout the year. With all 4 notebooks, there's actually over 900 pages worth of notes, and all the scientific references that we use to put the course together are listed in the back. These notes were a huge endeavor to put together. It's not just a transcript of what we said to take the easy way out. The charts, the graphs, we got things laid out in bullet points. 90+% of what you see and hear in the educational videos is there in the notebooks. That allows you to not have to be distracted by trying to write everything down that we say. You've got it in the notebooks, and you can really pay attention to the videos, so what you see and what you hear really sinks in. It's all about having you all understand what is going on so you can utilize this information to empower your life to be healthier. After the course is over, those notebooks are then lifetime reference material. Here are some pages, but it doesn't say proof or have a watermark on in the actual notebooks. There's some information about calorie density. There's some blood sugar curves in the glycemic index section of the course, vitamin D and calcium notes, and there's a few from where do you get your protein. Our students really, really appreciate the notebooks, and they tell us that when we send the surveys out at the end of the year. Also, to enhance the learning process, we have interactive quizzes each week that you access from the course outline. There are 5 questions, multiple choice. The course delivery system tells you which ones you got right or wrong, and then gives you an explanation of why things are right or wrong in order to enhance the learning process for some of the key points that we covered in those week's educational lessons. That's all really helpful, but we are there with you personally as well. We offer live video conferences every Tuesday except for the last Tuesday of the month. We offer those at 2 different times on Tuesdays. They're both designed to be question and answer sessions about the recent course content, but the 2 different times are strategically chosen so that most of our students will be able to attend at least one of those live. If you can come live, that is fantastic, but even if you can't, we've got it set up so you can submit questions in advance. It's really easy. And then on the live conferences, Dr. Karen and I answer the questions in advance and answer the live questions, and then we audio record each conference. So you can submit questions in advance, listen to the audio recording. You can also listen to the audio recording of any of the conferences that are not at a suitable time for you. So you can interact with us directly. And so many of our students tell us that being able to answer questions or ask questions, hear the answers, and hear from their fellow students is so helpful, just like our one student said in the testimonial we saw a few slides ago. We also have social and study groups private within the course. The study group is often for support in the conference topics. We'll post a link to an article or some resource somewhere else to help understand what's going on in the course. And in the social group, students get to know each other. It's kind of fun. You've got like-minded people in this group who are obviously very passionate and committed to plant-based and raw food nutrition. So bottom line here, 2 hours worth of professional videos per week, similar to what you see in this webinar, as well as the audio-only versions available, thoughtfully designed notebooks for each subject, weekly interactive quizzes, near-weekly live video conferences. We've got the social and study groups, and all of this is designed to give you the knowledge and confidence to keep on track so you can really, really get the most out of your diets and your lifestyle. So there the people are cheering because they are happy. For those of you who went back and looked at slide number 4 of all the topics that are covered, that covers a lot of our educator material. And a lot of our students are interested in going out and educating others. Not all, but some of them are. So because of that, we offer a certificate of accomplishment for students who pass 3 exams and submit a good quality final project. And about half of our students go through this process. So we print it out on nice paper. Dr. Karen and I both sign it, and we physically mail it to you, and it is suitable for framing. Again, most of our students just want to be able to answer questions for their friends, their family, their coworkers, but many of our students are educators and influencers and have clients and patients and other people who they want to be able to answer questions for and guide effectively. Couple of other quotes from recent students before we finish up. Julie from California says, "The information we learned is invaluable, enabling us to make better choices as to what to eat, how to get minerals that we need, the right kind of fats our cardiovascular system needs to stay healthy. I am so thankful for all the nutritional information presented." She also said, "Thank you for being you and presenting the class." That is very sweet. So Zuzana is somebody who is well educated about nutrition already. She has a PhD, and she said, "I followed the Mastering Raw Food Nutrition program to solidify my theoretical knowledge about raw food nutrition. This program is very well designed and offers reliable science-based information that is easy to follow and apply. The study load was manageable, and I did not feel stressed or under pressure. I loved listening to video lectures every week. This course offers significant flexibility, and Karen and Rick are excellent presenters. I recommend this course to everyone who wants to improve their health." And I remember when we got to the section in the course where we were talking about GMOs, genetically modified organisms. Zuzana's PhD was in that area, so she actually gave a little presentation and shared with us and her fellow students some things about that, and we learned a lot. And as I was watching that, it was actually her final project. I thought, my gosh, she is really smart and really well educated. So it's truly an honor when people like her join us. Now, at the other end of the spectrum, you don't necessarily have to be a PhD in order to get the value out of the class. So for example, Christina from the Czech Republic said, before the course, I had zero knowledge on raw food nutrition, zero experience with other nutrition courses, and had concerns that mastering raw food nutrition is for professionals to rise their expertise. To my great joy, the course material was very digestible, the pace not too fast, educators and participants very friendly and supportive, and the gain from the study invaluable. Glad I dared to sign up, and we're very glad that Christina joined us for the class as well. I mentioned before that to get your certificate, 3 exams and a final project, Christina's final project was documenting how things worked eating-wise, nutritionally, when she and her family went with another family, her in-laws and her kids' cousins, on vacation around Europe to see all the old castles and everything. And she shared, what it was like eating healthy with another family that wasn't healthy and how that all worked out, etc. So that was another great social type of learning experience that our students get from each other. So to sum up here, what do we consistently hear over and over and over again year after year? Our students like the scientific accuracy and validity. It takes a long time to look this stuff up in the research and make sense out of it and put it into the real world. We think it's worth it. They tell us, like you just saw, we made complex topics easy to understand. We cut through the confusion so things make sense. And I've been saying this for years now, and it keeps holding true. There is only going to be more and more confusion over time. As more people jump in, there's more anti-raw and anti-vegan backlash. As more people are out there on social media with their opinions, not their facts. So this is just a great way to cut through that. And you see how everything fits together. It all makes sense. In terms of the behaviors we see from our students, they make major improvements to their diets while they're taking the course. Not because it's a support group or anything like that, but by going through the educational process, a support component naturally comes out of that, and it's hard not to be really motivated to implement what you are learning. Because our students are so well educated, they're much more likely to keep things up over the long term. They find it much easier to speak to others about how to eat, and that gives them so much more confidence in their own diets, as well as feeling confident around other people, which is an important part of health, and we're really happy to impart that to our students. Many of our students, like I mentioned, are coaches, educators, etc. And actually about 10% of our students are fellow healthcare professionals, nurses, MDs, people with PhDs like you saw from Zuzana, etc. So we really, really are honored to create this opportunity for all of you, and we hope you will all seriously consider taking advantage of that. We thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope you found this webinar very informative and useful. We have some more webinars coming up this summer, so please keep your eye on your email for our July and August webinars as well.